Hello and welcome back to the Conscious Contact podcast. My name is Genay Peavey and I am here with Rocky. And I really spurred this idea of having this conversation from Twitter and a tweet that you made
Yes.
talking about just the reusing of content to make content, short form content in general, and how that affects your industry in gaming, which is like a monumental amount, I would assume.
Oh, absolutely.
And now there is kind of this pressure, and even I feel it, and I'm not really even in the industry, of you must make 30-second boom, bam text clips on TikTok or Instagram to be relevant.
Yes.
And well, I guess we'll just start with how are you currently navigating that?
So the funny thing is, long form content has always been much more successful for me because I'm much better conversationally than I am in like 30-second clips.
Yeah.
I'm not an outburst type person. I'm not like, a rage moment type person. So it's better to just sit down and have a conversation podcast like this for a long period of time. So those videos always did better on YouTube, and that's why I stream. But with TikTok and the short form content that I'm trying to navigate, I'm having to learn new skills. I'm having to edit. I'm having to parse through 8 hours of footage after a recording session and find 30 seconds or a couple minutes that I can cut together and string and storyboard.
Does that affect like in the moment, like while you're streaming, do you ever think, oh, I need to write down a timestamp so that I can clip what I just did?
Yeah, so the problem with that is that like I can timestamp when I'm streaming, but the recording is going to have different like timings because I don't record the entirety of my stream.
Yeah.
So and then if I press a button, the buttons go to Twitch, so I can clip the timestamp there and have a general idea.
Yeah.
But even so, like because usually what I do is when I make short form content, it's not like I just take a 30-second clip and then spice it up a little bit. Like, oh, this funny thing happened.
Yeah.
It's like I had a funny interaction with somebody over the course of 15 or 20 minutes.
Oh.
And then I have to figure out how to storyboard that and like make it into something entertaining. Which is another reason that it's very hard to find a good editor. Because to have a really good editor in today's day and age, I have to be able to send them like 2 hours of content and be like, just take your creativity, exactly, go through this and turn it into whatever you can. Because otherwise it's me going through and being like trying to communicate an idea, a very specific idea, and being like, okay, take this 10 seconds and start with this, then turn it into this, and then maybe include this 30 seconds here.
Oh my gosh.
It's a huge pain.
Yeah,
So,
and you have to worry about the visual part of it, like what thumbnail do you pick for said 30-second video that's going to draw people in, make sure you're making a face or,
make sure you have the right tags and you plug the algorithm, post at the right time, or else you could have great content. That's what I've been struggling with. Spend 4 hours editing a video, try to post at the perfect time, and if it just doesn't catch the algorithm, you get
it doesn't matter
200 views instead of 20,000, and you're like, oh, well, I just wasted an entire day of work.
Yeah. And I feel, and this is my personal opinion, I like long form content. So there isn't, that's just my opinion as a whole, but not everyone, and I feel this way about most things. I don't think everyone has to feel the same way that I do. And I'm not saying that short form content doesn't have a place. It doesn't for me, but I'm also older than the generation that
it is a different
mostly
demographic.
Consuming.
True.
Yeah. So it's hard for me. I remember at the beginning when I first started this podcast, I was trying to be like, okay, well, I guess I'll make this short form content and like set up a TikTok for everything, recorded stuff with like trending audio. And I was like, maybe I just don't like it because I don't want to do the work.
That is part of it. Yeah, for sure.
And then I sat with it and I did a couple and I was like, no, I just really fucking don't like this.
Yeah. If your brain's not wired that way as well to consume it, it's hard to create something that you couldn't see yourself enjoying.
Exactly. And I think that's the issue that I have. And some people aren't like that. Some people do consume that content. So I'm sure it's much easier for them.
Right. Because their brain's already wired that way.
Yeah. And they know what to look for and all of that kind of stuff. And for me, it's just, I can't get into it. It just feels very shallow.
Oh,
and it takes me out of the moment, especially when I'm editing the podcast. I watch the whole thing through, obviously, to edit, but I'm constantly thinking like, oh, should I write down this timestamp and clip that part, or should I clip this part? Or
well, yeah, and also some of the time you need context to set up those impactful moments, right? Like, so if you have a one-liner or something that was really meaningful, it might have been because of the previous 10 minutes that you listened to that led up to that moment. And how do you capture that in a 20-second clip?
I don't
You
know how
can't.
you can. Yeah,
You
it's
can't, yeah.
impossible to tell a longer narrative or a broader picture thing, which then again, this particular, like this podcast, for example, that is kind of the point, is genuine connection, long form conversation that just goes wherever it's supposed to. So trying to make, like, if I started at the beginning, before we pressed record, with only short form content in my mind, this would be a terrible podcast to listen to.
Yeah. Or it would just be less fun to record because you'd be sitting there with one-line questions or like leading questions, trying to lead the answers,
and
or
I
get
hate
shock
that.
factor.
Yeah, I dislike interview podcasts a lot. Interview in the way of like, I'm gonna ask you, so what do you do for a living?
Yeah.
Or how was your day today? Or what do you think about that?
Yeah.
Like, that's just not my personality anyway.
It's not a therapy session. Exactly.
Yeah.
How does that make you feel?
Right? Yeah. And I do see a lot of that as well, because it does make it easier for the host, I feel like, because all you have to do is do a little research beforehand, tap into what someone else is already excited about, which I think any good host is going to do.
Of course.
But then you're putting all the pressure on your guest to just put on a show.
That's actually like, okay, so that actually is kind of the whole reason I had that tweet where, so I tweeted out basically like, there's a recycled clickbait and like thirst trap culture.
Yes.
And if we don't like break that cycle, the industry is going to die. Or it's going to just completely change. But the reason I tweeted that out is because there's so many TikToks. I started using TikTok just to study TikTok so I could post TikToks.
Yeah.
And now I have the problem of like, now I spend so much time on TikTok because it is addictive, and also because I'm trying to find something meaningful to study. Like, how did this catch the algorithm? What did they post? What's their thumbnail look like? How do they categorize themselves, etc.
Yeah.
And there's so much content on TikTok where people are using other people and like exploiting them and putting them on the spot, kind of like you were just saying.
Yes.
But in a more
nefarious way.
Nefarious way. Exactly. It's like malicious. So like, if I'm sitting here and I'm talking to you, you could be asking me loaded questions that might actually cause a rift between us and damage our relationship.
Yeah.
But even more so in public, people are just exploiting people in public.
Yeah.
Like there's prank shows and like the
makes me
TikToks
so
where
sick.
they try and do something that people aren't expecting in public.
Yeah.
Like when we first were getting like YouTube and stuff, I think the difference between like early YouTube, like 2000s, and now is when people were doing pranks, it was in the way that people were doing pranks before YouTube, right?
Yeah.
Like they would do something goofy in public, but they'd just be like, messing with people, and there would be some sort of conversation or connection. And
it was
they
a
would film
genuine
it.
thing someone might do as a prank.
Right. They were trying to be funny. Just like kids would prank call when they were younger, not for content, but just to be funny. Just to do it. Now there's this hidden intent that like is being translated. Like, I am doing this to use you to get famous.
Yeah.
Because people want to have views.
Yeah.
So like that is very cringy to me. I can't watch that. It bothers me. And there's so many young kids that are just growing up with, I want to be famous. I need a following. I need a following. I need a following.
I get that from people a lot. Like I have a lot of women in my life that have kids that are young, like old enough to watch like your content per se, but not old enough to know what the difference between like being an adult and a child is.
Exactly.
And I'll tell them, like, they'll know what Luke does, and they're like, oh my God, my kid would die if they knew, because they want to be a YouTuber so bad, or
hear
they
that all
want
the
to be
time now.
Instagram so bad. And I'm like, don't.
Yeah.
Like, tell them to go to trade school. Like, YouTube's cool. Like, you
do
can
it on the
if you
side and
want.
see what happens.
Exactly. I think that's a great idea for really anything that is testy.
It's
that
a
you want
fun
to try
hobby
out.
that you might be able to monetize.
Yeah, exactly. Not something you need to put all of your eggs in that basket scenario. And talking about pranks, the fake prank stuff.
Oh, like I'm gonna pretend to steal a tip jar, and then I saw this on TikTok. Somebody stole a tip jar and then gave them $1,000 after. I'm like, that is just still so not cool.
Or the ones in the kitchen where it's literally both parties are in on it, and you can tell, and it's like a man and a woman most of the time, and like he'll do a magic trick, and at first he'll look at the camera by himself and go shh, and do this thing while she's in the background, and then he'll turn around and do it, and she'll go,
Oh my gosh.
And like those type of things get reposted. I see them on Facebook most of the time. And I'm like, what is this doing here? Like,
Yeah.
who thinks this is real? You look at the comments, a lot of people do.
A lot of people do.
And I just don't understand how.
Yeah.
Like, what have we done to people with quick content to where they are starting to believe?
Well, I don't even know if it's so much that the problem is that some people believe it, because they're always going to have gullible people. And they're always going to have people that don't believe stuff that even is real, right? Like, you're going to have the critics in the comics. But I think the more telling thing is that the content is just not good, right?
It's terrible.
So it's terrible. And that's the biggest thing. And it's frustrating as a content creator who's been around for like a decade to see people posting content that quite literally, it just sucks.
Yeah.
You know, it sucks, but it gets tons of views because people don't care if it's good or not anymore.
Yes.
They're just being entertained by scrolling.
Yeah.
They're just consuming whatever you throw in front of them, which is why, like, if you are creating content, I've always been like a perfectionist in the past, and it's better to just tell your mind to shut up and just post.
Yeah.
Because people will consume anything.
Yes.
And even if they have something negative to say, it's an engagement.
It's still engagement.
So who cares?
I think that is kind of another point to make. Like, we get to a place where it is just I'm not we as in you and me, but people can get to a place where it is just about views and they don't care what the impact of the content is, whether or not people are reacting positively or negatively. And whether or not they're actually saying anything. Because I get that there's a whole arena of just purely for entertainment. Streaming games is like a huge part of that.
Oh, yeah.
Like, there's not, most gamers that I see streaming, it's not necessarily an educational variety where it's like, here's how to play this game proficiently.
Right. That's more YouTube side.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So it is just like for pure entertainment. And there is a huge place for that. But there is this hole that maybe I'm just not following the right people. I don't know. But I feel like there is a hole of truly impactful content that could potentially have someone think about their life differently.
Right.
And it doesn't all need to be that deep, but that is kind of part of me as a human, and what I would like to see happen is
meaning.
Yeah, some kind of meaning.
So it's actually funny that you bring that up. So I was actually talking about this the other day, because last year was super bad year just for me in general, numbers wise, and just like, my passion for the industry and for content creation has been waning. And I was kind of depressed. I've struggled with depression in the past, like when I was younger, and I've worked really hard on myself on improving that and bettering myself throughout my 20s. And then I had a huge setback last year, and I was wondering why. And it was really frustrating me that I couldn't figure out where my passion had gone.
Yeah.
And I had lack of enthusiasm for gaming. I used to love helping people, and I considered myself to be an impactful streamer. That's why I did it.
Yeah.
I studied Buddhism. I don't know if you know anything about Buddhism, but I studied a lot of Buddhism in college. And one of the core philosophies of that is working on your own absolute happiness and then contributing to the absolute happiness of other people.
Yeah.
So I liked that concept. I wanted to impact people. And when somebody comes into chat and they're like, "You really helped me through a bad day," or like, you talk about something and you get deep on a topic, and people are just like so appreciative. They're like, "I've never had a conversation like this before with somebody."
Yeah.
And it's something that's so routine for me, because like growing up, I would talk to my dad, some of my friends, we would have real conversation all the time. And those were so shaping in my life, right? Like, they really helped impact me and like determine who I became to be. And the fact that there's so many people that don't have people like that in their life to have those conversations, there's a huge hole. There's a void that needs to be filled there, like you said. And I think that there's a need for it, but right now I don't see it being filled. And part of that, I think, is the pandemic.
Yeah. I mean, I think that we all, and I'm speaking super broadly, but I think everyone has some amount of PTSD from that.
Absolutely. On a societal level.
Yeah.
Yes.
The loneliness is through the roof. We wonder why everyone is so anxious and depressed and angry and doesn't know how to interact with other humans. It's because you removed that from them for a year and a half.
It's been like three years.
I know.
If you remove it for long enough, people don't know how to reassimilate either.
Yes.
Right?
And I mean, I had such a hard time with that. And I'm an introvert, so I loved being at home.
I loved it at first.
Yeah.
But then once I realized the choice to go out had been removed from me, it was making me like almost claustrophobic. It was like I don't have anything that I particularly want to do, but knowing that I can't is making me freak out.
Yes. And that kind of trying to figure out how to go back to even like just going to the grocery store. Like walking inside again.
Yeah, when you got used to Amazon delivery, like, you know.
Yeah, or just driving up and someone puts it in the back
drop
and you're
off,
on your way.
exactly, and you're gone.
It is so interesting to watch people who have not rebuilt that skill. And you can tell people that are like, and I don't know enough about this term to use it as like a definitive description, but the chronically online culture.
Yes.
That doesn't realize what reality is really like, that doesn't understand how to have real human connection, that doesn't understand that not everything is going to be funny or sad or enraging or what, like, doesn't know how to be bored, which I think is the main issue.
Oh, yes, that's a good one. I saw a clip. There's a psychologist on Twitch. I forget what his name is. It's Dr. K, maybe?
Ooh.
He was on a podcast, and he said that one thing that he tells people when they're trying to figure out more about themselves is, he says, stare at a wall for an hour. And they're like, what does that mean? He's like, stare at a wall for an hour. Your brain's going to serve up a bunch of thoughts, a lot of prompts. It's going to resist. It's going to struggle. But you're going to learn something about yourself in that hour, right? You're going to learn about what you like, who you are.
Yeah.
Just sit with yourself.
For real,
sit with your thoughts.
You are. Yeah.
You don't need the constant stimulation. And that's a meditative exercise. And meditation is so important.
Yeah.
So important.
I don't think people know how to do that anymore because, again, that requires you to put the phone down and to just be with yourself. And I think that we have conditioned people to not want to be with themselves, but to want to be online more.
Right.
And to be entertained, to have your brain like massaged in a way, like just numbed out. And we don't learn those, the emotional literacy of being able to deal with our own thoughts. It's like, oh, I'm stressed, I'm anxious, I'm tired, I'm lonely, I'm hungry, I'm whatever. Let me go on Instagram. Let me go on TikTok.
And what is that doing? That's suppressing those feelings. And when you suppress an emotion, you are not processing it.
No.
And when you don't process it, it just festers in your subconscious, entangles with other emotions and complicated thoughts, and then manifests as anger or resentment or frustration or anxiety, depression, all these other things that we don't want to have, but they only worsen because we're not addressing them.
Yeah. And you see kids with iPads and the meltdowns that they have when they're taken away.
Yeah.
We are teaching a whole generation to be dependent.
Absolutely.
Upon other things other than self-soothing to help them. And that is like absolutely terrifying to me because I don't know how you go through life like that with constantly being distracted and not just, oh, I may have ADHD and I'm distracted. Like you're intentionally distracted and you're consuming stuff that you don't even care if it's real or true or anything. And you've got this whole view of the world that you got solely from, 10, 15, 30-second clips from someone who could be completely lying to you.
Oh, absolutely. It's just a comfortability with like they have the phone, it's their security blanket, right?
Yeah.
And it's the same way that people or kids would be dependent on like their mothers or something like, and they get separation anxiety if they have to go to school, but something you have to get over because you have to be separated from your parents at certain times. But your phone, it's always socially acceptable to have it with you everywhere.
Well, not around me. It's not
true,
but it's you have to make that change because unless you have an outside
deliberately
force, unless you have an outside, it's like any addiction. If you do not have consequences, or you are physically removed from said addiction because of and you're beholden to somebody else to give it back to you, you're never going to make a change.
Exactly.
Period.
Yeah. It's very hard to have the self-discipline to make that change.
Because addiction, when it comes down to it, addiction has nothing to do with self-discipline. You may be able to, have enough self-will to stop at the beginning, but once you cross that line into full-blown addiction, your self-will does not matter anymore. You could be the most determined, self-starting person in the world, but if you get addicted to something, you're screwed.
Yeah.
Like you cannot interrupt that cycle.
You've
you might
changed
be able
the
to
makeup
for a while.
of your brain.
Yeah, you do. You turn off and on switches, and then they're stuck there.
Right. Well, so the funny thing is, So I've studied a lot about like psychedelics and their impact on the brain, and psychedelics are one of the things that's been very helpful in research for treating addiction, because imagine you have like these neural pathways, and the more we think about something, the more we're re-ingraining that thought into our head. It's like, imagine you have a hill with snow. Each time you have a thought, you go down and leave a groove in the snow, right? Yeah. And all these grooves are going to like crisscross and everything. And when you're addicted to something, no matter where you start, it's going to end at the same spot, which is, I want this. And whether it's your cell phone or a substance or whatever else. But with psychedelics, you completely recontextualize everything in your life. So it's like a fresh blanket of snow over the hill. And you can, if you're using it for rehabilitative purposes and you're being guided, you can kind of like choose where you want to go down and where you want to start and end.
So that you can start doing the work on what's going on at the top of the mountain.
Right, exactly. Exactly. And figure out, navigate on the way down.
Yes. Yeah. No, I think that distinction is extremely important to like, for a lot of people to know that there are a ton of tools out there that can help clear. And I feel the same way about depression medication, anxiety medication, all of that stuff. It is not a way to get rid of that feeling. It will help.
It's a tool.
Yeah, it's a tool. It's a way to get you to a place where you feel okay to do the rest of the work that's going to take that away.
I think that's an important distinction that a lot of doctors don't make.
No.
And that's the problem with doctors, is they just see it symptomatic and they just treat the symptom and they just write you a script. But if they were trying to actually treat the cause in tandem with the symptom, they'd tell you, hey, this is a tool, this is an aid, it's not a solution. It's not like, because if you get prescribed like an antibiotic, the reason antibiotics work without the doctor needing to tell you how to use them is they give you the antibiotic and your body has an autoimmune response. It's an automatic response in your body to use the antibiotics to fight off the disease. If it's a disease of the mind, if it's an illness of the mind, you are getting an aid. You're changing the chemical makeup so that you have the energy, you have the endorphins, you have the whatever you need to then rewrite, rescript, create a new routine. Because we're creatures of habit. Everything is routine.
Oh, for sure. And until you interrupt that, you're not going to see any change whatsoever. And if you cannot handle life without that thing that you're using to distract yourself, you're never going to get to the point where you can interrupt your habits, because it's going to just be there.
And I think that's actually a really good point to circle back to what we were talking about earlier with how the pandemic has influenced us as a society, because we've created habits of self-indulgence, of canceling plans, of introversion, and the impact that that's had, especially on people with issues like myself. I have ADHD, and ADHD can be a real pain in the ass to deal with sometimes, just setting my own routines and getting into habits and things like that. And one thing that I always struggle with is something called object permanence. I'm not sure if you know how this affects people with ADHD. But for those who don't know, with ADHD, if something is not in front of you, once you kind of like push it out of your mind, you completely forget it exists.
To exist.
Yes. And that sounds so weird to somebody who doesn't have ADHD. You're just like, no, sometimes I forget about stuff too. Like, no, you don't understand. It is out of my reality.
Gone.
It is poof, it's gone. It's like when you put something in a drawer, you shut the drawer and you forget that, not only do you forget that it's in the drawer, you forget what's in the drawer. You forget that the drawer exists. Because you've shut it. It's out of sight, out of mind. And I actually saw a TikTok recently of somebody talking about that. And it kind of was the stimulus for like, or the stimuli for, it was the catalyst for an important epiphany that I had. So he goes and he's saying like, hey dude, I saw your ex-girlfriend at the coffee shop the other day. And he's like, dude, why would you bring that up? What the hell? It's like, bro, it's been like 2 years. I thought you were over it. It's like, no, dude. You remember how like if I put something in the drawer and then I shut it, it goes away? He's like, you do that with grief and like emotions too? He's like, yeah. He's like, so all those funerals we've been to, he's like, dude, stop, So it was funny at the time.
Yeah. But then you're like, oh shit.
I'm like, oh shit, yeah. And then I was talking to my sister about the pandemic and the effects and how I haven't had passion for things. It's like, why am I not feeling connected to people anymore? And then the oh shit moment hit me. Like, I put it in the drawer. I knew I wasn't going to be interacting with people for the indefinite future, for years, if ever again. So I put it in the drawer, and it's not that I stopped caring about people. And that was an important distinction. It's a small distinction, but important. Is that it's not that that part of me died. It's not that my passion is gone forever.
Yeah.
It's that it was in the drawer.
Yeah.
And I can react like parts of you are manifest, they're currently here in reality, or they're latent.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what you choose to manifest, you can choose to manifest different parts of yourself. The self, who you are as a person, is fluid.
Yeah.
We just have this idea of ourselves, and we constantly snap that into reality.
And it gets so many people into trouble. I see that as a huge issue for people staying so stagnant as well. Is like everyone knows, oh, I can change, or oh, let's do resolutions for January or whatever. And here's the person I want to be at the end of the year, blah, blah, blah. But then you still tell yourself those old narratives of, this is who I am. Like for me, my thought process is, used to be when I was drinking alcohol, is like, I'm a piece of shit. I don't deserve to be here. I've done all these terrible things. I don't want to remember them anymore. Let me go drink again.
Yep.
And that cycle just continues to repeat itself. Even if you're like, oh, I'm going to stop drinking for such and such amount of time.
Right.
You still tell yourself that you are who you were before.
Yes.
Even if it's just minutes before.
We are tethered to our ideas of our past selves.
Yes. And to be able to interrupt that, I mean, that takes being able to be alone with yourself and your own thoughts. It takes being aware that there's a problem to begin with. And I wonder if, because ADHD, I think, is just so narratively prevalent. Do you feel like all of the short form content is making more people ADHD, or is exacerbating it for people?
I think it exacerbates it. So the thing with ADHD is, like, I guess you can train your brain to be in the traditional sense. People think attention deficit disorder. You think, oh, you struggle paying attention. And that's just one aspect of ADHD. I think that's the aspect that if you don't have ADHD, all this short form content, it's narrowing your attention span. So it can create issues that are like that. But all the other stuff, I don't know. Like the object permanence, there's tons of other, like, even hyper focus is another thing. So like that's why they say, there's a spectrum.
I love a good hyper focus moment.
Hyper focus is I feel like I have a superpower. Yeah, I feel like I have a superpower when I have ADHD hyper focus, which is why games are so good for me, and that's why I've created a career around it, because as a kid I was always drawn to games. They're very stimulating visually, like auditory, and I could focus because I had something that I cared about, like an end goal, whether it's improvement or getting a rank or whatever else. And I was very good at them because, and it's one of the few things that I was able to enjoy being good at and focus. And even in school, I was a straight A student, but I couldn't pay attention in class. I couldn't study.
You get 100 on the test, but you get sent to the principal's office during school.
I would pay attention just enough until I understood the information, and then I'm in space. I remember this vividly, this kid that sat behind me in every single class that I had in high school, and I would turn to him all the time and ask him what the teacher just said. And one time he just looks at me, he goes, "Where do you go for like 5 or 10 random minutes? Like, you were here looking at him. Like, where are you?" I'm like, I have no idea.
Space,
I'm in space, dude. Couldn't tell you. But to answer your question, I do think that TikTok is unhelpful. And I think for people with ADHD, it is very detrimental.
Yeah.
Because just because you have a mental disorder or a predisposition doesn't mean you're imprisoned by it, right?
Yeah.
You can mitigate it with willful action.
Yeah.
And that's why meditation is super important, especially if you have ADHD.
Yeah.
Because what meditation is, and there's such a bad stigma around it. Do you meditate?
I know. Oh, God,
I would assume so.
Yeah.
There's a negative stigma because people think, oh, you're just like some guru or some monk. They think it has religious undertones or spiritual. They think of like people who are burnouts or whatever else. There's a ton of negative connotations.
Yeah.
But meditation at its core is literally just an exercise in focus.
Yeah.
And that's why with my chat and my community, I do micro meditations. So I'll literally just do 3 deep breaths. I don't give it any other context or undertones. Just tell people to shut their eyes, relax their forehead, unclench their jaw.
Yeah.
And most of the time people don't even realize they're clenching their jaw.
Or the shoulders.
And then put your shoulders back and sit up straight. And then take 3 deep breaths in and out. And then when you do that, you're drawing your attention to the fact that you're stressed or anxious and you didn't realize. You're bringing yourself back to the present, which is centering yourself.
Yeah.
And you're checking in with yourself, which is super important. We don't check in with ourselves.
No, because
ever.
We're checking in with other people on Instagram.
We're checking in with our tweets or our engagements or other people, what this person's up to.
All these metrics that don't mean a fucking thing. Like, once you die, no one's going to care how many likes your most recent tweet got. Like, no one's going to care how many subscribers you had. They're going to care how you treated other people.
Exactly.
What kind of impact you made on someone else's life. Like, how you carried yourself as a human. And it's like, I think that it's so easy to forget that because we are shown metrics 24/7, whether it's our own or someone else's.
Yeah.
And we just get wrapped up in these numbers and seeking out this attention when it's available to us from real life human beings
Right.
pretty much all the time.
Well, that's why I really like that you phrased this in the beginning, that you're more interested in impact over metrics, right?
Yeah.
I think metrics are very important still, especially if you're a content creator. Like, you have to be paying attention to numbers.
Oh,
but like,
yeah. If it's your job, for sure.
But why are you getting the numbers is important to know. And it's like, you could have a dumbass funny tweet that goes viral and has hundreds of thousands or millions of views and likes. But how much impact did that have? Is people gonna even remember that was you that said that?
Yeah.
No,
like,
they're just gonna remember it as a funny one-liner.
Followers from that?
Right.
No.
But this is actually funny because this is from an anime, but I get a lot of inspiration from anime. I don't know if you've ever watched anime.
I've heard that this is the case. I'm not deep into it. The only two that I've ever really gotten into is Castlevania and Vampire Hunter D. I don't know if you can tell a theme.
You like vampires,
yes.
yeah. Castlevania was good. It was really good animation. The voice acting was great.
Yeah.
But so there's this one anime. It's called One Piece, and this guy. There's tons of like meaningful moments in throughout the course of its 1,000 episodes. But this one guy says, he says to his protege, he said, "When do you think a man dies? Is it when he's shot in the chest? Is it when he takes his last breath? No, a man dies when he's truly forgotten."
Yes, agreed. And that's Judaism as a whole, by the way. That's literally it.
So if you're having impact, if you're worried about what people think about you, if you want to be remembered, if somebody takes something from you and like takes meaning from an interaction with you, you're shaping who that person is.
Yeah.
And you live on through that person. And then all of the things that they do because of how you positively impacted them lives on,
That's truly being immortal. I mean,
that's Buddhist karma.
Yeah, that's how you
cause and effect.
Yeah. That is how you are remembered forever. I mean, that we remember people because they either did something really terrible or really great.
Exactly.
And you do kind of have to choose which one you're going to be at a certain point.
I think the funny thing in society is most people don't want to be either. And that's an interesting realization because I think nobody, people want to be seen as like a nice person or a good person, but nobody wants to be seen as like a great person because it comes with an inherent responsibility.
Oh, this is true.
And nobody wants to be seen as a bad person. So that's why most people just kind of funnel towards like a middle road where they just fly under the radar. And that's why people just are content with being sheep, just, being a consumer of content, not ruffling any feathers, not pushing to strive to anything great.
Yeah.
And it's
depressing.
It is depressing.
I mean, not only just like for them, but for society as a whole. Like, we are conditioned to live our lives through someone else's life on the internet. And not only does that cause all kinds of problems with, judging yourself based on someone else's losses and wins, you're constantly comparing where you are at in your life versus where they are at in their life.
Right.
When it's not comparable in the slightest, doesn't matter who you are. But then you're also sitting there on your phone feeling like you've gone on vacation in the Maldives and saw a comedy show.
You're living vicariously through all these other people's experiences.
But you're sitting on your couch not doing anything.
So let me ask you this, though. In Buddhist ideology, they always talk about how there's positive and negative to everything, like two sides to every coin, a reflective side of the mirror and a back side of the mirror. So if the back side of the mirror is depressing because people are just sitting on their phones consuming content, what is the plus side of that? The plus side is that we can connect to them and we can have those impactful moments.
Yeah.
So you can't change the whole world. You can't change the universe. But you can change your universe.
Yeah.
By positively impacting the people that are around you.
Yeah.
So instead, if we as individuals try to work on ourselves and shine bright and work on our inner sun, then the more people we warm by our presence, right? So like we can, if they didn't have that depressive side or that side that they need growth and they need somebody who's receptive to them, we wouldn't be able to connect with them. So it sets us up to be able to positively impact, and it sets up that meaningful exchange of person to help be.
With everything, I mean, there's definitely a like good moral way to use things. I mean, with any
Oh,
technology.
of course, yeah.
And then there's
That's
the
downside.
negative. Yeah. And I think I do agree with that. And I hope that the takeaways that people get from me is, and this is probably what is going to make sure that I don't ever really grow, is because I do try to tell people, like, when you're done with this, like, fucking put your phone down and go outside.
Right, yeah.
You know what I mean? Or right now, like, just stop listening and just go live your life. Like,
don't binge the next 10 episodes.
No, yeah. Like,
take if you got motivation right now, put it down and go use it while it's there.
Exactly. Because speaking of impermanence, I mean, motivation in general, you get a moment where there is a spark, and if you do not act on it, it goes away. Motivation is not like a constant thing. Determination comes after that.
Yes.
So if you're motivated, you got to go do something to get the ball rolling.
Absolutely.
And I hope that's not continue to, like, I appreciate you if it's continue to watch the rest of the video or another one or whatever, or share it to somebody that you like. But
like
I think,
and subscribe.
Right. Yeah. But I think that's like even the step further. Like, instead of you just listening to the next episode, if you're like, oh, I took something really good away from this, share it with somebody else.
And that's the domino effect, right?
Yes,
like, that's how you impact 6 degrees of separation. That's how you impact the whole world, right?
Exactly. Like, share it with someone and tell them, hey, this really made me think. Can you listen to this and then call me? Let's have a conversation about it.
Right.
That is the core of what I want. It's less so like, I don't ever want people to be like, oh, Genay said this really cool thing, because nothing that I say is original. It's come from someone else in my life that has inspired me. Like, there's no original thoughts going on in this brain, like absolutely zero. So you sharing that with someone else, that then becomes yours.
Right.
You will then be able to claim intellectual property rights. I'm kidding, but it becomes yours. You take that in, whatever little ism or saying that you hear, and it impacts you in that way. When you share it with someone else, you are then that person for them. You are the origin of that thought process for them.
You know, it's funny because, like we were saying, everything has a positive and negative. Sometimes people meet that with resistance because if you're sharing something insightful to them, a lot of times people are resistant to it because they're like, oh, this person's telling me how to better myself. And if they can trace, have you ever talked to somebody and they're like, oh, I already do that, or yeah, I knew that, or I thought of that already myself. And it's like, okay, well, you can have all of the validation you want, but that's where, like, true inspiration comes from. It's like inception. You have to plant the idea in somebody's mind without them being able to trace it back to you, which is why media like podcasts and things like this from people that you don't know is actually super beneficial. Because if I take inspiration from something I'm watching, they're not telling me it directly.
No.
Right?
Yeah.
It's not you asking me for advice and me telling it to you. It's not personal. So anything that we say that you can apply to your own life, it wasn't direct, which you can take as true inspiration.
Yes. Yeah.
As opposed to more of like a therapy session, which is beneficial in its own right. But if you're having it with your peers and not a professional, you don't want to be. It can be negative because you don't want to think that your peers are above you, right? They're your peers. And if you're in the muck with me, who are you to be giving me advice?
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
It's like, really, Jenny's gonna give me advice? Have you seen what she does on this? She's a hot mess.
Yes.
You know, but Jenny might have some insightful shit to say. She might. She just can't apply it to herself. And we all struggle with that.
Oh, fuck.
Right?
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that it's not any more or less valid.
Yeah. And I need to hear things from multiple people in different ways before it really sinks in too.
It needs to resonate.
Takes the right person.
Exactly. The right context, the right framing.
My right day and time, you know.
You have to be receptive to information as well. You can be given the perfect message for you, but if you're just in such a bad mental state that you're not even receptive to internalizing it. Yeah, that's.
Or if you're distracted because your phone's in your hand.
Exactly.
You know.
Or you think it just buzzed. Oh, did I just get a comment on my tweet?
Yeah. Like in that kind of redirecting the flow of like where we get our happy chemicals from is our phone going off. Talk about Pavlov's dog.
It really is.
It's gross because the companies, they tell us that they know that's what they're doing. They're very upfront about the fact that that's exactly what they're doing. And they keep us, they have content and they use the algorithm to have certain content be more popular because they know it's going to keep you on there.
That's their business, you know? Have you ever had a ghost text message?
A ghost?
Where you think that your phone buzzed, but it didn't.
Oh, God, yeah.
The fact that that is a common psychological phenomenon now is terrifying.
It should tell us something.
That we're constantly looking for the notification or the buzz and we're creating that sensation.
Yeah, and what I've realized too, and this is even just with me, is I'll get into real life situations with people, and I'm so used to my attention being sparked by a vibration or a noise, like I know my ding for my notification for a text message or whatever, that when people actually call my name in public, I have no fucking clue they're doing it. Like I pay zero attention.
Yep.
Like how is that? Like we've got to the point where that's a thing of the past. Like you are so deconditioned from someone being like, oh hey, so and so, yeah,
that
and calling your attention that way. Yeah, you're like, oh,
you're like, what? You just took me out of my whole world.
Yeah, like
because you get so
why
into.
Don't you just text me that? Like, come on now. But we are unlearning how to be humans, and we are learning how to be consumers.
Now, one thing that I think is actually beneficial about the constant notification culture is it's conditioning us to respond to pattern interrupts. Oh. And pattern interrupts are actually very beneficial when you are trying to interrupt your own negative thinking so that your thoughts don't snowball, they don't spiral. Yeah. If you're having a depressive episode or an anxious episode, the way that you stop that is by interrupting. And that's why meditative exercise is good, because you're refocusing. Okay, stop what I'm thinking, what I'm doing.
Quit it.
Bring myself back to the present moment, back to neutral, and then you go from there.
Yeah.
So my dad always used to say that stress is like blowing up a balloon. It's one stressful thought is a breath of air into the balloon. Yeah. Another thought until it feels like it's going to burst.
Yeah.
But if you remember that the balloon is there and you remember to let the air out of the balloon periodically, it never gets to the point where it feels like it wants to burst.
Yeah.
But you have to check in with yourself to do that.
Yeah.
So it's pattern interrupt. It's recognizing, why is this happening to me? Oh my God, what if this happens? What if that happens? Stop.
Yeah.
Pause. Take a breath. And then we're done. Yeah. And you bring yourself back to the present.
I think that is a perfect place for us to wrap up. And I hope that everyone is doing that exercise with us. I hope that you all take a deep breath and realize what your hands are actually on and not what you're watching or listening to right now. Obviously, I love that you're listening or watching. However, I want you to go out into real life. Do the things.
Listen to yourself.
Yes. Live your human existence for real. And appreciate you so much.
Of course.
I think this is such an important topic to talk about, especially in your industry, but for people as a whole. Just awareness and being present with right now and what you like. Put your brain where your feet are planted.
Absolutely.
And try to stay there.
Sounds like a platitude, but it's very hard
to true.
Think about what it means to be present.
Yes.
What's in front of you right now? What's here? Sensation of touch, your shoes on your feet, your legs pressing against the chair. That's right here, right now.
Yep.
Not all the other stuff.
Exactly. Let's enjoy real life, and I hope to talk to you again in real life soon.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Bye.
Bye.